Our planet, our future, your decision. Save the climate.
Through the COP, the CMP, the AWGLCA, the AWGKP, the SUBSTA and the SBI, there are 6 days to get it done before ministers arrive. Ministers will then have 2 days to take issues forward before leaders arrive. This means that there are a total of 8 days to prepare a workable package that consists of both immediate and long-term components which leaders can endorse on the 18th of December. The time for formal statements is over. The time for restating well-known positions is past. The time has come to reach out to each other. I urge you to build on your achievements, take up the work that has already been done and turn it into real action.
All we can say.
I'm going to give a little bit of an update of sort of the inside of what's happening at the UNFCCC at the Bella Center. And the Kyoto Protocol track is what you would think. It's for developed countries to take on reduction commitments under the Kyoto Protocol. It's divided into commitment periods. So the first commitment period was 2008 to 2012. And right now what they're supposed to be doing is negotiating commitments for developed countries for 2013 to, it's not defined the end, it could be 2017, it could be 2020, that's part of the negotiation. But what's happened is none of the developed countries have actually taken on any commitments, either in aggregate to say, for example, developed countries are supposed to be at least 40 or 45% below 1990 levels by 2020 in terms of their greenhouse gas emissions. And they haven't taken on individual commitments. So the US, for example, hasn't said, we're going to reduce our emissions by 75%. The United States doesn't want to take on anything that's internationally binding. They want it to be what's called bottom-up, so that every country just says, with our domestic legislation, we're going to reduce this amount, and we're going to reduce that amount. And it doesn't matter whether it is what science calls for or what justice calls for, it's just what we're going to do. And we're going to show it to the rest of the world, and that's it. So it's called Pledge and Review. Some people call it Show and Tell.
And make no mistake, Denmark is committed to maximum progress in the 2 tracks, the Convention track and the Kyoto Protocol, and to ensure successful and ambitious outcome. Let's get it done.
Danish Prime Minister, who has taken over from Connie Hedegaard, who was the president of the COP, of the Conference of Parties. She's Danish. He's taken over from her, and he wants to collapse the 2 tracks, and he's really working to find a compromise between what the EU wants and what the US wants, and it really doesn't matter what developing countries want out of this. And so right now what you're seeing is, for example, France and the UK have been lobbying very hard Ethiopia, the Prime Minister of Ethiopia, to say accept this deal from the EU, which is calling for 100 billion euros a year in long-term financing, which maybe if you are not familiar with the need, it sounds good. But an estimate right now of the need for developing countries to deal with climate change, to both mitigation and adaptation, meaning reducing greenhouse gas emissions and adapting to the unavoidable impacts of climate change. The UN right now is saying it's $500 to $600 billion a year. So talking about 100 billion euros a year is way too low, plus a lot of that money comes from the private sector. It's market-based. The majority of it actually is not public money from developed countries. The Ethiopian Prime Minister just came out in support of this EU package, but he's not speaking for Africa. The Africa group within the negotiations has a very firm position. They are calling for fast start financing, meaning pre-2012, of $400 billion a year. They're calling for long-term financing of 5% of global GNP by developed countries. So many negotiators from Africa are extremely upset at the undermining that's being done by France in courting Ethiopia. And now we heard that President Obama has been calling Bangladesh, he's called Ethiopia, he's trying to buy off countries because he'll be swooping in, he'll be coming tomorrow, and Secretary of State from the US, Hillary Clinton, is here today. What we also see is developing countries really trying to hold strong. So, for example, over 100 developing countries have now called for no more than 1.5 degrees Celsius temperature rise, a return to 350 parts per million, reductions of at least 45% below 1990 levels by 2020 by developed countries, and then much larger quantities of financing. And then at the head of the pack we have Bolivia, which has called for reductions of at least 49% below 1990 by 2017 and no more than 1 degree Celsius temperature rise.
That indigenous rights has to be a fundamental part of any new climate change negotiations, because our communities have been the ones that have been protecting and sustaining our natural environments for thousands of years, and we've only seen the recent spate of ecological devastation after our people have lost control over their lands, their territories, their cultures, their languages, their basic rights. And so what we're also saying is that we need to recognize and protect our indigenous peoples and their cultures and their rights, but we also need to make sure that whatever new climate treaty doesn't impact on those rights. Because what we've also seen in the past has been a lot of what we know as false solutions.
The red is a mechanism that says we can, because of the deforestation, the emissions resulting from deforestation in tropical forest, it's not boreal forest, it's only the tropical. By the way, the very fertile, and competitive areas in the tropics would be the cheapest, easiest, and fastest way to reduce emissions. So instead of discussing how to cut in the source or how to do the energy efficiency transition, we should right now start to pay for the countries to stop deforestation. Okay. The whole point is you have to pay to reduce deforestation. But who are the drivers of deforestation? It's the industrial agriculture. We are not discussing, for example, a key issue for reducing emissions that would be to dismantle the entire crazy and freaky agribusiness system that we have today in the world. Because if you count all the fossil fuels that are used to open the land, to heavy machinery, to all the produce the chemicals and the fertilizers, and then to carry to truck and to ship and to fly around all the food, this already would be this major cut. But this is not on the table. The industrial agribusiness sector now wants to receive carbon credits for doing the nice thing of no-till agriculture. But we know that no-till agriculture it's used in Brazil to expand GMO soy, GMO cotton. There is no-till peasant agriculture. There is agroecological system where you work with the land and with the biomass, but the no-till is a trick. And then in this bag of bad things that they have, there is also the biochar, this fanatic idea of growing eucalyptus, burn the eucalyptus, and bury the carbon stored in the charcoal in the land.
Consensus means that any agreement here can only aspire to the lowest common denominator amongst us. From our perspective, in the face of this growing whirlwind of disaster, making decisions based only upon the lowest common denominator is beyond irresponsible. It's gravely negligent. So while we must always work to achieve consensus, we must have an orderly method to move forward in the rare occurrences where consensus is not possible. Therefore, subject to one small change, we requested alternative A for Rule 42.
I think that you're being a little careless with trust. I think that trust is something that you earn. It's not something that you're given. And certainly this process still has to earn my trust.
Bro-Joergensen.